There's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to it be so humming. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord, yeah, yeah.
All right, here we are back again. New South Christians, it's a new year, 2024. This is going to be a weird one. I have no doubt about it. We got a presidential election coming up, and if anything, now's the perfect time to talk about these things. And if I got a great guy today. Now, I had this guy in class. His name's Dawson. I'll let him introduce himself in a minute. We've kind of kept up. Whenever we were in class, he was always great to talk to. But then I realized, sitting across from him a minute ago, I really don't know a lot about him. So this is going to be an interesting journey, but he's very strong in his faith.
Thank you.
He's got a plan. He's got a direction. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. So I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself, and then we'll get rolling. Go for it, Dawson.
Well, first, thank you so much for letting me come on. I've listened to the other episodes. They've been really
ready,
cool.
Huh?
I'm ready. I've been thinking about it a lot.
All right, good.
But my name is Dawson. I guess this would be like almost my 5th or 6th semester here. I've been here for a while at Vol State, but like we were just saying a second ago, I didn't quite grow up traditional Christian, maybe like some, I got saved later in life, like when I was 20. However, I have been in the South, like Florida and Tennessee mostly, for most of that time, but I don't know if I would necessarily consider myself like a typical conservative Christian or whatever. Like, I think that the term conservative gets kind of tossed around a little bit.
Oh, yeah. It's going to get real tossed around this year.
Yeah. I have a bit of experience now, like being in church, but before that, it was really not. Like, I went into my faith, like when I got saved, I went into it pretty much blank slate. I didn't know much about anything, and I've actually got a good, solid group of guys right now that I'm good friends with, and we every Saturday morning we'll crack open the Word and just go at it. And we have a group chat. We're always texting, just like, what do you guys think about this verse? What do you think about this verse and stuff? And so they're great guys. We all love the Lord. We love Jesus.
He's got a plan and a direction.
Plan, I don't know. He's got a plan, but I don't know. I'm just going to follow, see where it goes, see where it leads.
Well, that's awesome. That's good. Well, let me go ahead and get started.
Sure.
And wherever you want to go, we can go after that. But one of the first things, and I had shared some of this with you, it's still, I don't know, it still freaks me out, and it still kind of bothers me when I read that, 1/3 of Generation Z, your group, classify themselves as nuns. They don't necessarily acknowledge that God is supreme being, et cetera, and, this kind of stuff. And it just kind of blows me away, not just because we're in the conservative South and in what's traditionally been the Bible Belt, but everything that comes with it. I was reading last night about manifestation. And I don't, where have I been? I missed the boat. And so I'm reading about it, and it said that if you pull up manifestation on TikTok, it has 48 billion hits.
Whoa.
Now, talk to me. What is going on? I mean, because if you, let me make sure I got this correct. So manifestation is, I just restate positive affirmation or outcomes. I don't necessarily believe in a spiritual being. God's not listening to it. He's not part of this. This is just my kind of inner faith or whatever.
A lot of this is kind of coming out of what you would call maybe New Age Christianity, or kind of not necessarily Christianity per se, but
like
people
pagan?
who.
I mean, too strong? Or?
I think the word pagan has lost some of its kind of what it used to mean, or what like most people might. I think when people think pagan, now they're like Greek gods or something like that. That's what people would consider pagan. However, like, what does it really mean? Like, I think really the definition of pagan would be anything that's like not worshiping Christ, basically. So I think I don't think that manifestation in and of itself is something that people might like lose their salvation for or whatever. I think it's obviously a tertiary, quaternary. I think I learned that word this morning. Quaternary, like the 4th level issue. I could be saying that wrong. But yeah, I don't think if somebody's manifesting, they're like not saved. But as you said, like if you're taking God out of it. I really would love to talk about, in a sense, when you've been talking about same things, when I was listening on the podcast, and anytime you would bring up a question about this or that, oftentimes I felt like the Lord would bring verses to my mind about this or about that, or, man, that'd be a good answer to that question. Sure. And I think, in a sense, one of the big issues with today's generation, with every generation, is they just don't know the Word of God. Right. They just don't know it. Even people that go to church, they go to church and they don't read it. They don't know what it says. Mm-hmm. And again, not a salvation thing. This has nothing to do with like your personal standing before God. We are saved by grace through faith, and that is final. But people, they just don't know necessarily all the intricacies of the Christian life, what it means to be a Christian, do's, don'ts, what has been said. Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that jumps out at me, because obviously I am biased, but I have people on here that believe and don't believe, so fair to everybody. But it's like, I mean, a lot of things associated with the church have been redefined as weird, not normal, strange. And I'm like, okay.
Such as, what do you mean?
Well, no, I think about, like, I was reading last night, number one reason Generation Z is leaving the church is over the LGBTQ question. I think so. I'm going to abandon my whole faith and everything I believe over one issue of, you could say choice, depending on how you want to define that. But every young person that I've had on this podcast, that I asked them their opinion about that, you can find there's kind of a recoil where they go, I got to be real careful how I answer that.
Right.
How has one issue so ruptured the church through it? I mean, maybe I'm just saying what I believe right now.
Well, I think it's the same.
I got to tell you, that kind of bothers me.
It's the same answer.
Yeah.
People don't know the Word of God.
They're scared of their peers. And that I'll be canceled on social media, and they were talking about how brutal and vicious they are. And I'm thinking, man, but then I asked one young man, just was here a minute ago, well, how does your youth group, kind of handle those issues? It doesn't sound like me to handle them at all. At least his experience seems to be to avoid it. And I'm like, well, that's like the church doesn't want to talk about hell anymore, because everybody's going to leave the back door open, and they're going to come floating out. What do you think?
In my experience with some youth group stuff, it's actually funny. I don't think we've really had that many people come in who identified themselves that way. So it was kind of like more on I think the conversation not never, but hardly ever starts as far as I walked into church. And this is, I think, a lot of misconception that a lot of people get. They think that pastors are just up there on stage, just like hellfire and brimstone, all, gays, whatever. Exactly. I've never heard a pastor say that before. I've never heard no pastor that I feel I respect as a man of God. Like, I have never heard them talk like that. I think what happens is usually, this is something that happened at my church, and I won't name names or anything, but somebody came in. He was interested in checking out what our youth group was like, what our college group was like, and he came and had a private meeting with the pastor. We didn't even talk about the issue of homosexuality or any of this kind of, these new issues that are coming up. We didn't talk about that at all in our Bible study. And he and the pastor had a private meeting over coffee, and my pastor basically shared what the Bible says about certain issues to him, and he kind of just said, hey, I just can't vibe with that, sorry. And it was a very reasonably handled situation.
One of the things I read about church trying to regroup, because a lot of people argue they're losing your generation, and you're so big and it's going to have such an impact. But one of the answers or recommendations was, but be truthful. Sure. Always tell the truth. Be authentic. In other words, if your pastor was going to do the right thing, it was share the truth. Sure. If I find out later it was just kind of like a sell job, did you lose all standing, moral ground, ethical, whatever, and you're really not, this generation's not going to, that's not going to serve you well. Yeah. But I'm kind of like you. When I read that that's the number one issue that caused them to leave, but then I think, well, in my experience, I haven't experienced that. So where is this happening? Or are we just all in?
Yeah, I'm not going to deny that churches do that, handle it poorly, but I think a lot of times what might happen is what I think it's kind of like we remember the negatives more than we remember the positives, right? If something bad happens to you, some psychological reason, I'm not sure why, but those sorts of things stick out strongly to us in our brains, and we can create negative connotations with all kinds of things. That's one of it. So yeah, some people, I completely hear you. We hear you. Bad stuff happens in churches. We're all sinners. We can't stand on any moral high ground.
They call it church hurts. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, that's a very
That's one of my
common thing.
Church hurts. I guess that's a new thing. So.
But so number one is basically, I think that there definitely are bad people in the papistry, in the ministry. We're all bad. Let me put that on there. But there are some people who, through certain beliefs that they might have that are unbiblical, and through some certain actions like character traits that they display towards people that are, again, unbiblical, I think that they drive people away rather than bringing them to the cross, which is where we all need to go. We all need to be there. But I think a second part of it too is, gosh, let me just, goodness, I just need to read. I just need to whip it out real quick. Do you mind?
No, you go for it. Yeah, absolutely. We haven't anybody showed up with a sword.
The sword, this is just a really quick verse, and I think this just speaks volumes to kind of the thing of it. It says basically, let me start this. Romans chapter 1. Starting in verse 18, for God's wrath is revealed from heaven against all godlessness and unrighteousness of people, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Since what can be known about God is evident among them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen since the creation of the world, being understood through what he has made. As a result, people are without excuse. For though they knew God, they did not glorify him as God or show gratitude. Instead, their thinking became nonsense, and their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, birds, four-footed animals, and reptiles. And really, like, the juxt of that is kind of this idea that God is evident, I think. I don't think it takes a lot to kind of recognize, like, God is so clearly in the world and around the world, and people don't want God to be there. That's the overwhelming message of the Bible. Yeah. Most people don't want God in their lives, and they're willing to go ahead.
But the articles I've read that I find the most fascinating is that you have, something like 18% of Gen Z doesn't trust the pastor.
Sure.
And then their view on the future is negative. They don't seem to have any hope. Depression, anxiety, suicide rates, etc. But the other thing I found fascinating was, it's also like a contradiction. They also say they don't want to know about God, but they want to have a relationship with God.
Well, they can.
Yeah, exactly.
It's right here.
We were talking about the Asbury revival that I went to last spring. I've been going to church for a long time, but that revival was everything that I read about, that your generation wants led by you. There were no pastors leading that. There were nobody co-opted it. It truly came up from the youth group. It was a music ministry in the morning before their typical college day. Next thing I know, it's thousands of people coming from all over the world. I'm up there. I could feel the Spirit. It was unbelievable. And you're in line at this small college in Kentucky with thousands of people. The people in front of me were from Brazil. I said, why are you here? I just felt led to be here. And then when we all got a chance to go in, it's just praise and worship music. No preaching or anything. Just people praying for each other, healings going on and whatever.
Yeah, it should be a relationship.
I really believe this is my opinion. I think at the end times, that's going to be the kind of revival we've never seen. Yeah. It'll be one that sweeps the... as far as that.
Well,
this group. I don't trust the pastor. I don't do this. I don't do that.
Well, you shouldn't. You shouldn't trust the pastor. You should trust God. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I don't look to my pastor for salvation. I look to Jesus Christ. I'm not going to stand before the pastor of such and such church one day. I'm going to stand before God. And
it's funny you should say that because these were some of the things I found in a cool article. They were talking about the criticisms of the church: less performance, more presence.
Yeah.
I want the presence of the Lord. I don't need the performance on stage.
And you don't need to find, I mean, you're not
Yeah.
going to, I don't think the Bible in any place
Yeah.
mandates that you go to a brick and mortar building on
Yeah.
Sunday to worship God. We
Well, you know,
worship
I'm
God
glad-
in spirit and in truth. That's
Yes, and
what
I'm
Jesus
glad
says.
you mentioned that, because that also is something interesting that I read, that most of the people that are having true experiences with the Lord that they say they want are not happening in the brick and mortar big church on Sunday.
Hmm.
That what they're looking at is almost the equivalent of a rock production. We're gonna do this many songs, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna talk about tithing.
Right.
I'm gonna give you a message that goes 35 and a half minutes, and then we're not gonna mention hell, anything negative, and we're all out the door.
Right. Well, so then a caveat to saying that is we are not, I don't think you would say this, but
Uh-huh.
neither am I. We are not saying that it is okay to have a private relationship with God
Right.
apart from other believers.
Sure.
I think Jesus makes
Oh.
that very clear.
Yes.
What are the,
Two or
the
more
guy
gathered,
said,
yes.
well, the Pharisee or whoever, the lawyer, comes up to him and says, hey, Jesus, what are the two greatest commandments? Or what is the greatest commandment?
Right.
And what does he say? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets rest upon these two things. If you love God, you are going to love his people
Right.
and others.
Right.
If you love people,
So
then
this
you're
is
going to
the
see
solo
God
shot
in them.
somewhere, yeah.
You cannot like separate loving God from loving your neighbor. Essentially, it is a non-separable thing. We love. I mean, all of 1 John talks about that. I mean, you have to like attempt to love people, and you show your love for God through loving people. When Jesus talks about like giving the water and stuff
Right.
to the people,
Sure.
when did we see you hungry and starving, Lord? And he was like, what you did to the least of these, you did to me.
Yeah, I know.
And so that's the I think the main teaching of the Bible right there.
Well, I think for me, from my experience, going on my first mission trip to Guatemala this
Yes.
summer was
Yeah, let's talk about that.
It was a real changer. The humility, I mean, whatever arrogance was in me was quickly dashed. I mean,
Yeah.
delivering food in the morning to homes that by definition are not homes, to little kids and moms, and just, I mean, it was sad. I
Yeah,
mean,
we talked about that a little
and in
bit.
the afternoon, doing like a vacation Bible school for all these little kids who don't know they're poor,
Yeah.
who don't know they're destitute. I mean, it's just sad.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this is being on the field. They call it the mission field for a reason.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I felt more Christian, more alive, more in touch, close to God in that moment than I think just about anyone in my life.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, for those who don't know, I went to Guatemala too. Separate trip over the summer. Same thing. Immense poverty. People didn't have clean water.
Oh, I
They
know.
didn't have food.
Yeah.
They didn't really have that good access to education. And I'll tell you what, some of those people had more faith than I've ever
absolutely.
experienced. I mean, when you literally, there were people there that we could tell by the way that they were living, if we had not come and brought them this food and brought them this water filter, there is a real possibility that they could have starved to death in the next couple of days.
Sure.
I mean, honestly. And that's Guatemala.
Yeah.
It's not Uganda or what, I
Right.
don't mean to offend by that. I don't know
Yeah.
what the most poor African country is, but
Right.
I don't know, you wouldn't necessarily think that. But yeah, it just changes your whole life. Anybody who is thinking about going to a country that's impoverished to do some kind of work like that, I totally recommend you go and just see how the Lord opens your eyes to
Oh, yeah.
just how like rich
humility,
and
I mean,
abundant we are
yeah.
here in America, just with their stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, when we got to the airport in Guatemala City, I mean, I ate a Subway sandwich, Some of the food didn't exactly agree with me, but
Yeah.
I wasn't.
I mean,
falling
there's
down.
definitely pockets
Yeah, I
of.
wasn't falling down sick, but I'm chewing on this Subway sandwich like it is just from heaven. And I'm thinking, I've got the money to buy it.
Yep.
These people don't. Riding around, I don't know if you remember this, but the motorcycles just kill me.
Oh,
You got
yeah.
a man here, he's got a child on the bars, another one in the front, his wife's on the back, she's holding a baby. Nobody's got a helmet on.
No helmets.
They're dodging through a city that's
The little
every
buses
turn
that are going
is death.
around and-
Through our interpreter, I asked the police officer, "Are there a lot of deaths, wrecks?" Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They just come with bags, and clean
dangerous.
them up, and just keep going.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but I'm thinking that's transportation 101 for Guatemala, but we would never do that.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
And if we did, we wouldn't allow it. I mean, for somebody to endanger all those people, and I'm thinking, I mean, just something simple like that is just amazing to me.
Well, people do that here. We actually was working the other day, and I looked out in the restaurant across from mine. I saw them, and there was like a big white van that pulled up, and a bunch of people got out of it. They looked Hispanic. A bunch of people got out wearing like the work shirt, and they went inside.
Sure.
I'm assuming they work in the kitchen or something there, and they didn't look like sad or anything like that. They got out. They were all joking with each other, and they went inside. And I was like, I don't think they're doing that by choice. I think somebody goes to a apartment complex or a neighborhood, picks up a bunch of people, and then takes them to work.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, that's happening here. And these people are probably so happy to do that and come here from wherever they're from and come here just to like have the opportunity to live in America and work and make money and send it back to their families.
Right.
And we're like, no, I need all this and that. Like, I would never go and like take a van full of a bunch of people to work, but I just don't have that humility. You know what I mean?
But you know, it's weird you should say that now, because one of the things I was reading last night as I was getting ready for today was, the peak of Christianity in our society was around the 1950s.
Really?
It was a white, male, Christian. I mean, it was just in everything. It wasn't defined as weird or strange or whatever. Now, fast forward all these years, and a lot of stuff people are looking at how the church is made fun of, ridiculed. They're weird, they're out of touch, they're this, they're that. And I mean, it's just like, man, how did we go from this to this? And it starts to bleed over into other things where ethics, morals, etc. Because whether we like it or not, or whether we're Christian or not, a lot of ours in this society come from the Bible, come from those things.
Absolutely.
I mean, even when we were in economics class, the borrower is a slave to the lender. There's so many references to money and stuff like that. So I don't consider that weird to use those, but it's like we've almost flipped to another direction. And I'm thinking, so the people that come here from out of the country, let's say they don't share the Christian philosophy, but they do come here. What are they going to get here from your generation? In the past, they would get the Christianity, the lessons, and all those because they're part of the fabric of our society, whether you're a believer or not. So, what is the modern day immigrant going to get when they arrive here?
A TikTok.
I'm worried about manifestation. LGBTQ defines us, and I'm like, that is a huge, profound shift and a change. So, what is the America of the future? What is your I know this is mean. What is your generation bringing us?
I don't know.
Fast forward 70 years and Jesus hasn't returned. What are we looking at then?
I don't know.
Because can I tell you a few things real quick? The women and men, according to what I read last night, in your generation, they're going different directions. The female's going liberal. The male over here is more conservative.
Oh, wow, that's
He
interesting.
is not graduating from college. His suicide rate's higher. His depression rates are higher. She's over here angry. 8 out of 10 say that they were victims of sexual harassment.
Whoa, 8?
8 out of 10, that's what they say. So you got this group over here, and then I started thinking to myself, I thought, okay, the institution of marriage has been under attack for a long time. What is this going to? So you're politically polarized, you're economically polarized. And I asked one of the ladies in my class today, I said, if you get your college degree, are you going to be interested in dating or marrying non-college educated? No, of course I do. So are we setting ourselves up for a generational failure of epic proportions?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think COVID might have helped us see this a little bit, that there is a huge amount of cultural Christianity in the South. There are lots of people who kind of look to something and they kind of like do the religious thing because that's what we do here in the South. But I honestly don't think that there's I don't know. I don't think that I think that a lot of people might lack a kind of deep-founded conviction that, like, wow, God is real and He is supreme. And when we kind of talk about some of these questions about, like, what is there for the politics and stuff, it's like, well, I think God is concerned about politics, but I also think God is concerned about redeeming creation. And whether that's through America, I think the growing church, like the largest part of the world that the church is growing right now, are places like China and like Iran, I think. I know a guy who knows a guy basically, and he's been all over the Middle East, starting churches, seeing disciples made, baptizing people, and it seems like they don't have the kind of problems that we have.
Right.
They're like, he gave me a funny story. He said, I think he said they were in Afghanistan, and they like went over to Iran, or maybe it was vice versa. They were basically coming out of big persecution. I mean, major persecution. Like, you are going to die, your family is going to disown you for being Christian, basically.
Right.
Like, if you get baptized, you know, like, and then if somebody finds out, you're going to die, basically, or spend the rest of your life in jail. And then they left that, and they went to, like, another country that was still pretty bad, but more free. They had real churches. And then they come there, and they're like, what the heck is going on over here? Like, why do you guys argue so much? Why do you like, what do you mean I'm reading the wrong Bible translation? Like, what do you mean I'm going to the wrong denomination?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like, I've never even heard of this
It
kind of
is
stuff
kind of
before.
a crazy system.
And
isn't it?
I think in the end times, I think it's pretty clear that there's going to be an immense amount of persecution. I think Jesus 100% promises persecution for believers. I think we're living in a
But don't you also think that, I guess I try to think about the positives too. I think about the massive revivals that are coming. Like the Asbury's just a small taste, just like the 70s, small taste. But what's really coming is this huge one. I mean, that's what I picture.
Well,
kind of like
I don't
your
really,
last chance to catch the wave.
I think it may be depending on your interpretation of Revelation. Like there would be a different way. I have not studied so much up on the idea, so I don't want to necessarily give a wrong viewpoint on that. I think some people might interpret it that there will be a big revival like that.
Sure.
Some people think the church is going to be all raptured and then everything's going to be whatever. I'm not like super tied down to one belief. I'm totally like, I don't know, I could be wrong.
Right.
I think we're probably all wrong.
Sure.
I think what's interesting, like when Jesus comes, I think it's in Luke or whatever, but Jesus comes and he starts to say like to the Pharisees, you guys pour through the scriptures and you think that there's life in it, but they testify about me, is what he says.
Right.
And he's like, basically saying, you guys missed it. I'm here, you missed it.
Right.
And they spent years, years and years and years, their entire lives just poring over the Old Testament scriptures, and they missed it.
Right.
You know? I'm not saying they were completely wrong. I'm not saying we can't be right about some things, but I think the point of the matter is I don't think God is going to let himself be fully known by us, nor could we. I mean, we're talking about an infinite God.
Right.
How can our little tiny pea brains comprehend the vast infiniteness of our Creator? And he's given us quite a thick book to understand a little bit about him. I mean, that's a little bit right there. But still, I mean, we're talking about God right now, like the creator of the universe. I just don't think we're going to be completely right about everything. And I think, honestly, anybody who thinks that they're completely right about anything outside of
Probably dangerous, huh?
outside of fundamental Christian truths about grace and the deity of Christ and stuff like that, I just think that we should all be a little bit more humble about our beliefs, Yeah,
humility comes out in a lot of articles you read. Well, let me ask you this, because we're going to run out of time here in a little bit. I am curious about what we were talking about. So what have you been up to?
I've been doing an apartment ministry.
Yeah, could you explain that? I'd never heard of that in my life.
It's basically an organization that pays for me and my roommate's apartment. We get free rent. We still have to pay utilities and stuff, but we have a few requirements that we have to fill out. And we're basically there to try and just meet our neighbors, interact with the community, and just share the love of Jesus to anybody who we come across.
Really? So they pay your rent and put you. Are you in a large complex, a small complex, or?
Excuse me. It's a pretty small. I say it's a smaller organization. There are other apartment ministry kind of things that are much bigger, but we happen to be in a smaller complex. They do stuff over lots of different complexes. Our complex is pretty small, so we've been actually having a bit of struggle, kind of engaging with people, and that's a long conversation. But yeah, we've already met everybody basically, and we're kind of I guess nobody was really that interested in Jesus. So
Where are we going from here?
it's
huh?
kind of like Luke 10. I think Luke 10 is like kick the dust off your feet, basically, and move on. But
That's
we've
right.
got a couple more months
knock the
left.
dust off
and
your feet. Let's hit the road.
So,
But it
it's
is a
been difficult.
fascinating idea because it brings me to this question I wanted to ask you. Several people I've had on here and people that I'm friends with in my personal life, all kind of, it's not that they're down on the church. They just don't seem to want to go to a concert. They don't want to go to this. They don't want to go to
Yeah.
that. It's so big or whatever. But they long for the opportunity to be in a small group. To
I
have
hear you
their
talk about the
prayers-
Irish pub.
Yeah, exactly. To have your prayers met, to you know, pray for healing. And I mean, maybe that's where you meet your real neighbors. Because I don't, in big churches, I don't meet my neighbor. I just shake their hand and leave.
Yeah,
You know,
I've
there's
had
not
the
much
big church
going on.
experience. I've had the house church experience. I've had the small church experience.
Okay.
I think right now, like I mentioned earlier, my group of friends, I genuinely think I find the most relationship and iron on iron brothers in Christ through my friends, and we all kind of go to different churches now, like on Sunday mornings.
Okay.
But I don't think that like you have to be part of one fellowship or congregation in order to be
Right.
like in God's, plan or whatever. I think God. It's funny. I think God's got like His will over here that He's doing, and He just does it because He's God, and He doesn't wait for us basically.
Right.
And then we're over here like piddling around with like little arguments and disagreements, and then sometimes we like kind of bump up against what he's doing, and he's like, "Finally, you guys figured it out," and then we'll fall away again, and we'll go and do our own
Well, that's like the
thing.
Billy
and-
Graham quote that I was sharing with you before we got started.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like once you've run your race, exhausted all of your poor choices, that's when I
And then
show
God
up.
steps in. Mhm.
And I will tell you this, like in my personal life, the pandemic probably was the best thing ever happened to me on a spiritual front. Stuck in the house alone, isolated, going through all this stuff, going through the ups and downs like a lot of people, worried about elderly parents and all that kind of stuff. Thankful to God I had a job where I could, do online courses and still get a check. But at the same time, started reading the Bible more, going back to the faith. And then I read a book that John Bevere, Driven by Eternity. And I got to tell you, there was something in there that lit my fire, and it
Yeah.
hasn't gone away.
You got to go listen to.
Yeah.
Do you like John Piper? Do you know who that is? He's a pastor.
For some reason, it rings a bell, but I'm not placing
He's
the name.
he's pretty. He's got a pretty big church. But I think I love him. I think he's great. He's got one sermon that he preached at like a conference way back in like 2000 or
Sure.
something. It's called "You've Got One Life, Don't Waste It."
Yeah.
I think that's it's. A lot of people refer to it as the seashells sermon. And man, I mean, he hits it like
Well, I'll have to
hard.
check it out,
You should
yeah.
listen to it because it kind of
'Cause
like
you need those
grips you.
you need to get your engine refired periodically
I
because
think so.
which is and we're going to have to end here in a minute, but there's a couple of things I want to ask you before we do. In the Bevere book, he talks about your calling, the great white throne of judgment that
Oh,
you'll
yeah.
as a Christian, not saying you won't go to heaven, but you'll also get that
Oh, yeah.
judgment where, hey, Dawson, this is what I called you to do. This is what you chose. Now,
Yeah.
let me show you how you messed up the plan.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know why. That really resonated with me because I'm much older than you, and I realize I've been at points in my life where, you know what, the ship sailed. I missed it. But he says he's infinite. If you missed it on the fourth one, he's got a fifth one.
Yeah.
He's got a sixth one. But he says you have to have faith. You have to offer yourself up, his will, not thine, in all things,
Right.
and surrender, and then the door will open.
Oh, yeah.
And I think teaching young people, being around education all my years, I'm like, that's probably the most profound thing you think of is that wherever you get your motivation from, and obviously in our case, it's obvious, but that seems to me the depression part, the
Right.
anxiety, because if you don't have that, I mean, they just don't seem very happy. And I look around at your generation, I'm like,
if you live in a
it's the
world
pits.
where you don't have like, this is what I found in my philosophy class was like, okay, like there might be some genuinely like, legitimate things that you might have to pick with Christianity, or there might be some questions that we
Sure.
can't quite answer just using the Bible, basically.
Okay.
But I genuinely think that with the preponderance, based on the preponderance of evidence, I think that's like a
Sure.
legal term. I
Absolutely.
think the Bible is one of the best, if not, I think it is the best, but I think the Bible is the best
Yeah.
like worldview to ascribe to.
Right.
And if you don't have like this solid foundation, I mean, it's literally a parable. Jesus is like, anybody who doesn't build their foundation like on these words of mine will be like a man who built his house on sand,
right,
and when
when the
the
water
wind
comes,
came and
it's
it
gone.
washed it down. So
Exactly.
it might not be perfect, and at the end of the day, we might have to change a lot to join ourselves with God in
Right.
what He's doing. But this is the foundation that I've said that to myself several times in life. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put all my eggs in this basket.
There you go.
I'm going to put my eggs in
Okay.
this basket. And I'm like, if
All
it's
right.
wrong,
All right.
I don't know. But
then here's the
it's-
last question for you, and you can end on a positive note because I know you will. So tell me this: the Church of Dawson,
Yeah.
for the Gen Z, how we get them on board?
Well, I definitely feel like
What's the
actually, I
plan?
genuinely feel a calling to some sort of ministry or church planting in the future.
Sure.
And this is a really long conversation, but obviously, the first and foremost thing is we need to build our foundation on the Word of God,
Okay.
what it says, and do it.
Okay.
We need to be.
That seems pretty simple.
We need to be people that read the Word, know the Word, do the Word, and really just. Again, kind of this comes back to the whole like, oh, well, how do you deal with different issues, this, that, and the other. I don't think God was not aware of those issues when He wrote His
sure.
Word. I
Absolutely.
think that whatever the current climate culturally might be, I think if we just stay true to the Word of God, it is going to work out in the end. And if not, then we kick the dust off of our feet and we move on. Because honestly, like I said, at the end of the day, we're all gonna. I think in Romans it says like we are all gonna stand before the tribunal of Christ.
Yeah.
Like, don't judge your brother. Don't you know you're gonna be judged too? Basically, like
Well,
it's yeah.
I saved this because you were coming, so this is how I'm going to end. It says, how to get Generation Z back to church. Don't sacrifice the truth of Scripture. In other words, lovingly show. In other words, follow, just
Yeah.
like what you said. Meet them online because technology. It's
Yeah,
just
that's a big
different
part of this feature,
and
for
unique
sure.
ways to connect with Z. In other words, take issues like mental health and the other, be all things. But this is the last part. Jesus loves lost causes.
He sure does. He loves lost people
I read
too.
that and I went, hallelujah. That's this podcast.
Right.
Jesus loves lost causes.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're lost causes and everything.
No, He's
I
on the
think it's
throne,
good.
like you were saying. He's on the throne. And there's one
Yeah,
last little
absolutely.
story. It's like when oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. Not Elisha. Elijah. When Elijah was hiding from like Queen Jezebel, and I forget the king's name, but he was basically like, "Oh Lord, like I have enemies on all my sides. Like God, I'm the only prophet left. I'm the only one left who believes in you." He's like, "What are we gonna do? What are you doing?" And God was like, "Look, I have 7,000 who have not yet bowed the knee to Baal. 7,000." And he just continues to confirm to Elijah, like, I'm doing work, I'm working, you just trust me, you
Right.
do what I say, and I got this. And I think that that's kind of the message we need to say
Right.
is that God has a remnant, God has people, God is supreme over any challenge, any weapon formed against us will not prosper. God
That's
is on the
one of
throne.
my favorite.
Yeah.
I could go into a whole story on that one, but I will tell you this: one of the best preachers I ever had. He always, in times of crisis, he always was he said, "Just remember, no matter how lost it looks, He's got a plan.
He does.
He's in control, so
He's in
don't
control.
freak out. Whatever." Well, anyway, that's about all the time we've got. I just want to thank Dawson for coming on. I knew it would be good. I knew it would be intense. I probably have to go home and get my Bible out, make sure I'm keeping up. So I just want to thank him for being on it, and thank you for watching. And we're putting together a website, and so we can interact, et cetera. So if you have any questions or comments for us going forward, we'll be able to do it. So God bless you and have a happy day. Bye.
People get ready, there's a train a-coming. You You don't need no baggage, you just get on